Welcome everyone to the Cordwainer Sustainability webinar. My name is Katie Greenyer and I'm Creative Talent and Network Director at Pentland Brands. In the audience, we are joined by staff and students from London College of Fashion, De Montfort University and the University of Northampton. And this evening's panellists are Cordwainer Freeman Joachim Sedelmeier, Head of Design at Paul Smith Limited, Cordwainer Freeman Helen Kirkum, Footwear designer Helen Kirkum Studio Limited, and our inaugural winner of the Cordwainer's Footwear Awards back in 2014. We also are joined by James Ducker, bespoke shoemaker, Kerry Ducker. I will be taking questions in the chat, so please let me interrogate the panelists that we have been joined with today. So without further ado, let's kick off, no pun intended, with Joachim.
Hello there. Hi. Yes, my name is Joachim and I work for Paul Smith, the fashion designer who has got a big part of his collection also accessories and shoes, and I had the design part there. I'll tell you a little bit about Paul Smith's approach to sustainability. It's gradual but all-encompassing. We're looking at all details on our products and improving them where we can. We started doing that about a couple of years ago. The company has created a path to sustainability now that's on the website. It can be followed internal and external. We also have a sustainability manager for the company who's working with all the departments to increase the sustainable product offering and company-wide awareness. The recently introduced sun logo tells the customer our approach. Every product that's labeled with the sun logo, either in the shop or on the website, has got a minimum of 50% sustainable materials. And all you designers out there, you're pleased to hear, it is really important to recognize that it starts all with design. According to the EU Commission's Science and Knowledge Hub, it is estimated that over 80% of all products-related environmental impact are determined in the design phase, which means when we start designing a product, the materials we use, how we use them, where we make the shoes, how we make them, where we ship them, how we ship them, and the transportation cost or means are all determined when we sit down and draw up a shoe. So it's really, really important as a designer to be aware of that. And for us, that's become more and more important. We're constantly looking to improve our material choices and making processes, either with our existing manufacturers or we're looking for new ones. Fairs such as Linear Pelle and the Future Fabric Show help immense for that. And also manufacturers are taking the hazardous VOCs, the volatile organic compounds or chemicals in the making process more and more seriously. So we have more and more access to less volatile chemicals out there. So for instance, in one of our factories where we make leather soles in Italy, they only use water-based glue since last year. So we, again, where we can, we try and improve the way we put the product together as well. Furthermore, we've introduced a green column, again, to all designers out there. When we start a spec, as you know, it more often than not ends up in an Excel sheet, your design's there, and then all your products are listed, the materials, the colors, the compounds are usually listed for the shoe to be made in the factory. We've added that green column that correlates with the product and the materials to check if there's any sustainable credentials from the thread to the insole, to the leather, to the lining, to the sole. If there are such sustainable credentials like recycled material or chrome-free leathers, we will add that up, and then at the bottom it gives us the opportunity to check whether we hit the 50% mark for it to become a sun logo shoe or product. So that's a new thing we've introduced.
That's such a nice idea. That's such a lovely idea.
Yeah, and it's really it really makes it clear at the beginning of the process that whatever we touch, whatever we put in is now considered, whereas before it was more about anything, the color's got to be right, but now it's like the color and where it comes from, or where we, where we make it. So it is that sort of approach of becoming more and more aware of, what you put in.
And great for the consumers to know as well that there's a checklist that's being done to enable that.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I mean, it's really quite complex, because ideally you want 100% sustainable shoe, but what is 100% sustainable? So we started somewhere, which at the beginning was really hard because you wanted to be the best. But I think more and more there is no silver bullet for the sustainability solution. So more and more you have to realize that bit by bit, what we do better all helps. And I think that sun logo is a really good start. I mean, our total product offering also in ready to wear has gone up immense with the sun logo. For instance, in our PS collections on the ready to wear side, I think over 75% are now offered in, like, all the cotton, over 75% is organically grown or organic. So that's all changed within a couple of years. And we'll try and get there with shoes. Shoes is more complex, takes longer, and is the offering on the sun logo is somewhat smaller, but we are trying to get there. Generally, I think what I've realized, the more and more you work with, with the sustainability in mind, I find it more and more important that we strive for more circularity. The current linear economic model of take, make, and waste, in essence, we source materials, we make a product, and then it ends up on landfill, really has got no future. So, that's where we are at the moment. But I think what we need to start is introducing what we call the 4Rs, the reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle. So, but also from the take and make process onwards. So if we start taking more sustainable and source more better materials, if we produce more sustainably, either locally where it makes sense, or with like less VOCs, for instance, and then also looking at one of those 4Rs, reducing the amount of harmful substances, also reducing the collection size. So this is something we started a couple of years back, that our collections used to be immense, and we realized that with B2B, we're selling a lot digitally now. We actually don't have to make all that many samples anymore. That has quite a big impact, actually, when you think that we make every season, we make about 400 or 500 pairs of samples only. So little things like this will help it. We have now also started a repairable product. It's very, very small, but it's a shoe made in England, which we will launch for autumn winter 22. That will be repairable. We can take it back in the English factories, we'll repair it. It's sort of a new approach for us to kind of, find out about that market as well. It's one of our most expensive shoes, but we are selling it at the moment at wholesale. And of course, the last recycling is important. Either recycle content, like we do a lot of knitted trainers, for instance, where all the nylon fibers that used to be 5 years ago, virgin nylon, is now recycled PET. At least it's recycled at the beginning. Unfortunately, we're not there yet to have it recycled at the end. But again, all of those things bring it sort of back to us in the sense of it makes the product a better product, a longer lasting product, and therefore, it just is that more sustainable than where we were.
Have you found that there's been price implications on sustainable products?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Have there been price implications on your sustainable products?
Yes, there has, and it's sort of a classic economy thing. The minute you try and do something better, and the minute you go out there and buy something like a veg tan leather that was almost discarded a while back, all of a sudden the prices have gone up. or I mean, in another world where things are recycled and repurposed, there is more work gone into. Therefore, it's actually more expensive than originally oil-based product, for instance. However, what we've also noticed is when we explain why it is more expensive and we have the sun logo, for instance, on a product, there is no price resistance at the moment, and I think that's a great thing. So therefore, we obviously look at it, more and more. But really, to understand the complexity of sustainability, you need a deep insight of sourcing, manufacturing, distribution of the product. And I think we can't expect that from our customers. It's really, really hard. And it will be really important, in my view, going forward to get manufacturing brands and policymakers together to simplify the message, because at the moment, even though I know quite a lot of what is, for instance, a better upper material or a better rubber sole or part recycled sole, I still, as a normal consumer, I'm still a bit confused. I get brands that sell vegan shoes, but I know there's a lot of PU content that will end up on landfill. There is all sorts of different things that are really complex for the customer to understand. So I think going forward, we really need to find a better way of explaining to the customer, what is a sustainable product.
There's so much more in the way of educating the consumers. I think that it's a very complicated process, because I don't think there is one answer to sustainability. There's a whole plethora of answers, and it's just trying to work out which one's best for your brand and your consumer.
I totally agree, and that's how we took the Sun logo approach, where basically we try and do the product we have, will make it better, more sustainable, to a point where we're really 100% happy. So it needs to be tailor-made for sort of every brand.
And you've worked really hard, haven't you, as well, in terms of you've done your own research and course on sustainability as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well? Because it's a passion of yours.
It is. And I've done a course in lockdown, as you do, an online course. And I find it really interesting. But to me, the bottom line is there is no silver bullet for sustainability. There is a multifaceted approach. And like you just mentioned, every brand or every maker of a product has to decide for themselves what is more sustainable. Because it's for, we are, for instance, in a certain price segment, like we can't get over it. We can't, for all of a sudden, for instance, just sell handmade shoes. It's impossible for us as a brand. So we need to work within our world and improve that on a constant basis. What's really interesting is there's a lot happening on almost a daily basis. I get emails of recycled leather people, of, obviously then you need to look into whether that makes sense for us. For instance, we've decided that we're not going with PU coated vegan or vegetarian leather, because for us it's better to have a veg tan leather that lasts longer, and the shoe, it's also better, more in line with our customer. Therefore, it makes more sense. We now stay clear of, more and more of chrome. We go more and more chrome free and more veg tan.
Do you want to quickly explain what chrome free is? Because I think there'll be quite a lot of people as well on the call that won't understand that part of the leather process.
So there's a lot of metals that go into the tanning process when you have a chrome tanned leather. I think it's got the advantage on the leather making that it becomes a more consistent leather. So you can do a lot with that, but the chrome salts, or a lot of those metals, are really hard to break down, and a lot of it, more often than not, ends up in the wrong places in the water waste. So what we've decided is wherever is a chrome-free leather available that's more naturally tanned, or veg tanned, which is totally vegetable tanned, we go for that. We think that's, apart from all of that as well, it feels so much nicer. It's almost back to how shoes used to be made and how shoes used to feel. So it's actually quite a refreshing sort of approach again, you know. Even looking at, for instance, we've introduced the made in England shoes that are repairable. It is really how Paul started before he had a big shoe collection. He actually went to Northampton, used to buy the shoes and sell them with his label in his own shop. So we're almost going back to a stage how it used to be, which is interesting, but also, you know, obviously not everything can go back, because being a fashion label or fashion brand, one has to realize as well, we are selling now more than 50% of trainers because that's the fashion. But in that world, we're trying to improve where we can with recycled materials, and better leathers and, yeah, longer lasting product. So that for us is a more sort of an approach that seems to suit us.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask for questions in the chat, and then I will take all the questions at the end. So I'm now going to move on to Helen Kirkum, who runs her own label, Helen Kirkum Studio. And Helen, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, really happy to be part of this Cordwainer Sustainability webinar. And I think exactly as Joachim was explaining, it's such a multifaceted world. It's such a complicated world, but it's also extremely important. So I think just having a space where people can actually have the conversation and start to think about what they can do is so important. And I think having us three here, all from completely different backgrounds with completely different businesses, also helps to showcase exactly what Joachim was saying, that there is not one answer. There's so many different ways to do it. So on that note, I will just firstly explain who I am in case nobody knows me. So I am Helen Kirkum, and as Katie said, I have my own business, Helen Kirkum Studio, and we have a small studio based in North Greenwich, where we mostly focus on creating bespoke, made-to-order sneakers for individual clients. So our practice is all completely focused around post-consumer waste. So when you think of sustainability, there's so many different angles. And actually, I loved, Joachim, what you said about take, make, waste. I think it's so true, and it's so relevant about the way that, you know, we do as a society and also as designers and brands interact with products at the moment. That is very much, it's very linear. And so for me, the waste part is essentially this whole new like facet that I can do so many things with. So how did I actually get to that place that I basically just use old shoes to make new ones? So I actually studied at the Royal College of Art. I did my, well, first of all, I was at Northampton. So shout out all the Northampton students. And then I went on to the Royal College of Art, where I did my MA in footwear design. And at that point, I was really, really interested, always been interested in the process of wearing and the process of making. And I think I always was looking at different construction processes, looking at how shoes are made and how we could change that. And yeah, I got really interested in trainers, because from Northampton, I'd done very traditional footwear. And then I was interested in trainers because it was my personal style, and I actually didn't have any clue how they were made. So I wanted to see how they were made, and the easiest way to see how something's made is to take something apart, I think. So I started asking people for their old trainers, and be like, oh, can I take your shoes apart? And no one would give me them. And I realized that there's something specifically about shoes that we're so precious about, even when they're completely ruined, falling apart, beaten up, we still don't want to part with them. So I got really interested in this idea of the kind of afterlife of shoes, what happens when they are falling apart, what happens to them next. And I think especially my personal experience at Northampton, and after Northampton, I also used to work at Jeffrey West. And so I understood that with traditional shoes and, you know, brogues and dress shoes, you return them, you resole them, and that's like a process that's very normalized within that sort of area of footwear. And in sneaker culture, just didn't exist. There was absolutely nothing. There was no way to repair your shoes, basically, or a kind of a second life. And I think the sneaker industry is really made for exactly as Joachim said, that take, make, waste, and it's designed around planned obsolescence, basically. So it's all very trend focused. So everything is planned to only survive for a certain amount of months, years, whatever, until the new thing comes along. So that's what I got really interested in, basically. How can I change that? Is it possible to change it? And will anyone take me seriously if I try and change that? So that's kind of where I started. And that led me on to, collecting old sneakers, basically. So when I went just so off script there on like a big tangent. So let me just get back to what I was saying. When I was at RCA, I basically wanted to take the shoes apart. Nobody would give me any shoes. So I had to find another source. And I reached out to a couple of recycling centres in London, and I started working with this amazing recycling centre called Trade. So you might have seen they've got recycling bins based all around London and around the UK, and they also have quite a lot of charity shops in London as well. And I went over to their recycling centre, which is based in Wembley, and I was just amazed with how much stuff they get donated. So many, not just shoes, they've got clothes, they've got suitcases, they've got books, they've got bags, they've got everything in there, and so much more than they can cope with. And I tried not to get overwhelmed, just stick to shoes. Let's not start making too many businesses. But when I started looking further into the shoes, they explained to me that basically they end up with odd shoes that when people donate the shoes, so if you donate your shoes, make sure you tie your shoelaces together, because if the shoes get separated in the sorting process, then they become odd, and then they're useless to the recycling centres, because if they're trying to resell or send those to third world countries or people in need, they can't find an Air Force One and be like, oh, I saw another one of those 10 minutes ago, because they're trying to go through everything so quickly. So it's super important to pair your shoes when you're recycling them. So basically that kind of made my mind up for me, and I thought, right, well, I'll use all the odd stuff then, because I'll use, what no one else can do anything with. And that really started me on this journey at RCA, but then, into what is my business now. So that's basically what I do. Take old shoes, make new ones.
And you do it so well.
Thanks. So now it's really nice, because graduated RCA 2016. And the other thing as well is that at that stage, 2015, 2016, there was nothing on the shelves that existed in this, that had anything to do with this message really at all. And what I was really interested in, specifically in sneakers and trainers, is could I create something that was so obviously worn, so obviously created from secondhand materials, but that people still wanted, and it was still important and beautiful? Because I think, everything was very white and shiny on the shelf and completely devoid of that idea of making. And even now, the question I get so often when people see my shoes is like, oh, are they handmade? And every shoe that you've ever put on your foot is handmade by someone, but it's just that the industry is set up in a way that we disassociate with how our products are made. So that was something especially that I wanted to bring to the forefront of the sneaker industry as well. So that's basically what I'm trying to do.
I love the way you tell stories through your shoes. That people have stories within their footwear. So when they give you, clients will give you, I don't know, 4 or 5 pairs of their own shoes for you to make one pair of shoes, one pair. I love that thought that you've got so many different stories and so many different special memories in all of those shoes, but then you make a pair of shoes that you're able to wear with pride again, that have all those stories in.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting, because now I've kind of laser focused in on post-consumer waste, so everything pre being owned or worn by somebody. It's makes even more sense to me, kind of what I'm trying to do. And those legacy pairs, which are the pairs where people can send me their old shoes, is also a really important and like valuable message around post-consumer waste, because it's so many clients that send me their shoes, they, you know, it might be like their first ever basketball shoes, or shoes that they got married in, or shoes that they ran a marathon in, and all these different shoes that have so many meanings, but you know, they don't wear them for whatever reason. So it's a really nice way to showcase what you can do with those shoes and how you can give them a second life. And then equally, people can just get from me shoes made from the recycled stock at trade that doesn't have so much the personal memories, but it's more got a bit of like mystery to it, which I love. It's like you find these shoes, you deconstruct these shoes, and they've got, you know, people's names written on them, they've got marks on them, they've got, you know, and there's all stories embedded in this material that you don't know what it is. So I think that was one of the key messages that I find really important to bring across. And it's also kind of changing mindsets, or just opening up people's ideas to a different mindset, because I think, again, with sustainability, there's so many avenues you can go down. And a big focus for us is just kind of the education side of things, teaching people about just how they can use their products, how they can, what they can do with them after the end of their life. Because I think, as for designers especially, quite often you think of the shoe up to the point that someone buys it, and then you don't really care what happens after that. So I think it's so interesting to think about this whole other life that the shoe has after it's been bought. So for me, I feel like it's just as important if somebody, you know, messages me on Instagram and says like, oh, I was really inspired to cut a bit of my shoe off, you know, stick a bit on, change the laces, do something instead of throwing it away, or even just to fall more in love with like the worn aesthetic of a shoe, I think is equally valid. So yeah, I think my work is definitely a lot about mindset as well.
You've definitely inspired me to fix my own knitted trainers when my toe keeps going through, because it just, you know, before I probably would have chucked them away, but now I sort of think of you and I think I need to put a patch on there or chop another old trainer up to put it on. So I feel like I'm doing a Helen Kirkum with my own shoes. I think it's the name that you should, you know, you should register the process, call it a Helen Kirkum when you fix your own shoes.
Yes, that's so true. I love that. But I think that's exactly it, you know, and we also have a workshop that we do called Sneaker Sculptures, which is where people make shoes out of their household recycling. And again, it's still tackling that idea of post-consumer waste, about how you can think differently about materials and like the products that you interact with, whether it's an old pizza box or an old shoe. It's kind of opening up like your mindset and just thinking about design in a different way. And our sneaker sculpture workshop is available, you know, on the website, and it's like directly downloadable. So it's so nice because it's something that's easy for people to access. And if they want to feel inspired, you know, want to try something new and want to feel like they're doing something towards that journey of, you know, being more creative or doing something, taking steps in the right direction, then it's a really nice thing for people to do as well. So yeah, I feel like I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but that's
it was amazing, Helen. Thank you so much. If anyone again has got any questions for Helen, please put them in the chat. I'm going to read them out later at the end. And so we really need to interrogate these designers that are passionate about sustainability. So make sure you ask some really good questions. This is your moment. So now I'm going to hand you over to the beautiful, lovely James Ducker, bespoke shoemaker, Carrie Ducker. James, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending the Cordwainers Sustainability webinar. My name is James Ducker. I am a bespoke shoemaker, and I am half of Care Ducker, along with my business partner, Deborah Care. We founded the company in 2004, making hand-sewn, hand-welted dress shoes for men. We now also run a shoemaking school in Shoreditch, which is where I am now. So if any of you want to learn hand-sewn shoemaking, you know where to come. We also run an e-commerce site selling tools and materials and leathers for shoemaking. And we have a small ready-to-wear line that we make with artisanal manufacturers in England who use their very particular construction method, but with our designs. And we do those on a made-to-order basis. Now, referring back to what Joachim said about how shoes used to be made, well, in lots of ways, my method, my craft is inherently sustainable because it is the way that shoes used to be made. So one aspect that we particularly focus on is we source all of our tools, materials, leathers from the UK as much as we can. We've always done that. We think that that's a very natural thing to do to support businesses within the UK. So we do buy leather from overseas, but when we do, it's because we can't source it for the quality that we need here, and that is generally for veg tanned leather from the Tuscan veg tanned leather area, principally Tempesti and Badalassi, which are two tanneries that we deal with directly. In terms of our suppliers, we know them all personally. We've met them. We've been to their places of work, so we can see how they work, and so our supply chain is verifiable in that respect. Which is obviously a good thing. Now, in terms of our product, because of the quality of the leathers we use and the way we make the shoes, they are inherently very long lasting. A pair of our shoes will last you 10, 15, 20 years. And during their lifetime, they are fully repairable. So that, obviously, the volumes that we work at are tiny compared to say Paul Smith. I mean, it's chalk and cheese, but it's a method of making and a kind of product that is desirable in terms of sustainability because of its longevity and durability. So maybe aspects of the way we work can be translated to larger production. I mean, I don't know, but hopefully that would be a thing. We also have just started, because of lockdown, we've filmed all of our production, our making processes, so that students from around the world can buy the films, and then we do Zoom support, so people don't have to travel to the UK if they want to come and do a course, which is a very good thing, I think.
So brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, and we've also done it with bespoke customers. So we've made a couple of pairs now where we've measured their feet on Zoom, and we've done all the fittings via Zoom. And so I've got 2 clients who I've never actually met, and so that's, again, 50% of our customers are from abroad, so they obviously have to come to the UK to see us and do fittings. And so if we can reduce that traveling, that's obviously a good thing.
That's really good. So in terms of how do they have to measure their feet and then send you the measurements?
Yeah, so we provide them with a kit, and then they need a helper, and then we're on a Zoom call, and I say, you know, a little bit like this and do it there, and we help them through it. And I was obviously slightly concerned about whether it would work or not, but it has worked really well. So yeah, it's definitely a way forward.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Yes, going back to what Joachim said as well about leathers, we only use veg tan leathers. We used to use chrome tanned leathers for our uppers, but we've stopped doing that now. And the thing about veg tan leathers is very often the animal husbandry for the animals is of a higher quality, and then the tanning agents and the pigments and the finishing products are vegetable based, which means that they're easier to dispose of, and the tanneries that veg tan are very careful about water usage and the effluent that they produce. And one example of that I'm going to give you is a company that we use, a tannery called Bakers of Colleton in Devon, and they are a pit tannery, which is a very ancient method of tanning that the Romans used. And essentially the hides are suspended in pits in the ground, and then in a tanning liquor, which is usually made from the bark of trees. In this case, it's oak bark. But it's an incredibly sustainable tannery because the cow hides are local cattle, and they arrive salted from the abattoir to the tannery, and then they're put in lime pits, and the lime is locally sourced as well. The hides are then put into the pits in the ground, and the tanning liquor is made from locally coppiced oak bark. And once the oak bark has been used, it's then turned into compost, which the tannery sells. Then the hides are suspended in the pits for 12 months. And once the leather is finished, the tanning, the effluent, the runoff is so clean that it goes back into the mill stream. So its environmental impact is tiny, and for that reason we love it. It's also extremely durable. Obviously, it's a small tannery and its production is very small. So in terms of scale, it's quite difficult to use it, but for a company like ours, obviously it's perfect. And yeah, and the tanneries in Italy, which veg tan as well, have similar stories, which is
And are there many tanneries like that across the world, or are they just, I mean,
there are not many. There's another pit tannery in Bristol. I don't know of any more in the UK, but no, there aren't many at all. One of the biggest ones, which was Rendenbach in Germany, has just closed down, which is a great shame. So yeah, it's quite niche. That's the truth of it. But you know, as Joachim was saying, Paul Smith is trying to use veg tan leathers.
yeah.
I mean, the other thing about veg tan leathers is that they not only are they more sustainable, they are actually very beautiful. They age beautifully. They get a natural patina from aging, and they have a character. You can see the life of the animal in the skin, which you can't really see in chrome tanned leathers. But it takes a long time to do it, and so they are much more expensive generally. Yeah, Joachim.
Sometimes the customers need explaining that, because sometimes the natural growth, which is what you and I, probably a lot of people like, is not consistent enough for some of the customers. So we have to explain that more often than not, that natural means also slight inequalities. And, you know, so it's quite interesting that the customers got so used to uniformity, especially through trainers, as well as Helen mentioned earlier, you know, that something slightly out now needs to be explained. Yeah, so we have to go through that process as well.
Yeah. One other thing that we've recently started doing, we started using this brand of glue from Italy, which is water-based. As what Joachim was saying before, it's water-based and doesn't use any VOCs, so it's non-toxic, which is very good. One thing that none of us have done is kind of define what sustainability is, because it's such a broad kind of church. But I think a general definition would be our ability to meet our needs without adversely affecting the needs of future generations. And I think generally you can divide it into three areas. One would be environmental sustainability, which we've talked about a lot, but there's also social sustainability, which is well-being and workers' conditions. And so one of the things that we find important is supporting, so a craft like ours, a heritage craft like hand-sewn shoemaking, needs businesses around it who will supply us with leathers and tools. And so the social sustainability there is it's supporting British ones so that we're keeping them in business. And that to us is really important. The third one would be governance. So the ability of businesses and corporations to change their policies to become more sustainable, which is what Joachim was talking about. But it's also the national governments bringing in laws to kind of try and force that forward a bit, which I think is also important.
And we've got a question like that in the chat, but I'll probably come to that at the end, I think.
Okay. Yes.
Have you covered everything, James? Is there more that you'd love to add?
Well, I was just thinking what Joachim was saying about education with the consumer. I mean, it is a very important thing, and about people throwing away things too readily and not repairing them. And there was a recent article in Eco Textile News, and it was saying that 43% of us would throw away a pair of shoes if the laces broke or the zip broke. Well, that's just madness, really. And with 20 billion pairs of shoes are produced every year, and 300 million pairs go into landfill. So, you know, the consumer has to think about, we have to think about our behavior as well. I mean, it is down, a lot of it is down to businesses and how they run themselves, but we also have to think about the way we consume as well.
Yeah,
totally.
It's yeah, those numbers are shocking. I mean, they all vary around what you just said, but if 84% ends on landfill, it's billions and billions of shoes. And I think, I mean, again, one thing I picked up on our course was as much as it's important for all of us to do our little bit, the minute a big corporation like a big Nike or someone else does one small change, it has a bigger impact or a huge impact. So I think that's where a lot more needs to happen from the top down, from the policy making, or incentivize things like they incentivize electric cars now. So it's much easier to get one, to have one, because you don't pay congestion charge, for instance. Sort of the minute you incentivize an industry with doing something better, it'll happen much quicker. And I do think things are a little bit slow in that world. It's still that take, make, waste economy that's pursued, in the grand scheme. So I do think a lot more needs to happen from the top down.
I also think it's about the messaging, in terms of, you were talking about the laces or the zip broking, or, just almost having an awareness campaign that, that some polish and some new laces and a new zip or a patch or, something else can actually add so much value to your shoes and give your own personality into your own product. And it is that, reincarnation of your own sense of self and your own sort of, pimping up your own gear, which is just so special. But I mean, whenever my laces break, or when I actually feel like it's an opportunity rather than, throwing them in the bin. It's an opportunity to buy some new laces, or to, put a patch up, which I have now called the Helen Kirkum. But it's also a bit like the new regulation on washing machines, on actually fixing electronics, to actually be able to, that companies offer things that can patch, mend, or give new life to our shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Joachim, you go.
Well, there you go.
I was just going to say as well on that fact, like, you know, people throwing away their shoes if the laces are broke or whatever. And when you mentioned earlier, Katie, that you've got some knitted shoes with a hole in the toe, it's such a design flaw, honestly, because I go to recycling centres probably once a month and go through all that, not even all their shoes, a tiny percentage of their shoes. And the amount of knitted shoes I see in there with one hole in where your big toe is, that is where it's the responsibility of the designers. Like, that is not good enough that is, you're designing a shoe like that, because that, you know, for a hole in the toe, it's hard for somebody to understand how they would fix that. Whereas like laces or something, it's a little bit more straightforward. But I think we're also in this world where people, you know, Apple did it with the iPhone. They made it so you can't fix it. And as soon as you can't fix something, you just throw it away. So when they suddenly put everything in a case that you couldn't take apart yourself, it took away our ability to be able to replace, you know, parts and to understand what that means. So I think that it's a whole, you know, generational thing where we've completely forgotten how to even fix something. And that's where I think, like, you know, we've all touched on the teaching and the education side of things is so important, which is a big task.
But don't you think that it also makes you cynical, because you think, well, if they're making trainers that fall apart or get a hole in the toe, they must know that happens, so they're doing it on purpose. So I imagine that when a company tries to present sustainable credentials, the consumer is very cynical about it, thinking, well, actually, what are they doing? And I think that's why external auditing is actually really important, because within a company they can say all sorts of things, but we don't actually know. And there's a thing, for example, an example of it is B corporations, which is an organization which a fashion brand or a shoe brand can apply to, and there's over 300 questions, and then they get a B Corp listing and a score. So they have to present over 300 different aspects of their production in order to get that it's like a seal of approval. And without that external auditing, I don't think people really trust corporations.
I tend to agree to an extent, but on the other hand, the customer really doesn't understand the complexity. So I think the customer can be quite easily fooled, you know, with a lot of new sustainable brands. There's so many, especially in the shoe world, sustainable shoe brands that came out of nowhere. And when you really look into it, what they're doing is not that different to what we're doing, what other, you know, existing brands are doing. It's just they're selling it better. And that's where I think the external independent auditing needs to be, like, really, you know, regulated, and there needs to be more happening, because it's almost too easy to come up with a sustainable shoe and then you actually ask, so what happens at the end of their life? And it still ends up in landfill. Like, I've seen a really interesting report. It was a German sort of panorama program about where they followed 10 celebrities, and they put GPS trackers into their shoes, and they were all taking them to recycling center in big shopping malls or shoe recycling centers, and they were all promised that they were either taken back or recycled. And I think more than half of them just ended up in landfill, and they could track it at every stage. And it's like what Helen said, what happens in trade, the minute, you know, it's not a pair or something else, it's gone. So when you just forget to lace them together, for instance, it's 100% a landfill item. And there are things, you know, people don't know enough, and even the companies who claim they do the recycling, or they work with other organizations, they don't really get checked, you know, enough in a way, or have no incentives to do that properly, which I think, for me, incentivizing things is a real positive way of making people do things, because they get something back. Because, yeah, consumers have become very lazy. It's so much easier to buy a new shoe online than buy a lace, probably, in the shop, you know.
And also very fashion or trend led as well, or very fashion or trend led. Yes. And I think that's the thing. It's almost And I think even the knitted shoes that we've been talking about with the hull, it's not until you've owned a pair that you realize actually after 3 months that your toe does go through the hole. And then do you buy another pair? I mean, I haven't, because it annoys me and I've had to patch them up. And also I do love them because they're so comfortable. They're like slippers, but at the same time it annoys me that I've only had them 3 months and it's a design flaw.
Yeah.
So we're going to take questions now. Yes, the question round from the audience. Come on, audience, get your questions in. So I have got a few. So I'm going to start from the top. So we've got one from Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed. Lovely to meet you. Your question is, hi, thanks for your great explanation. My question is that many brands claim that vegan leather is sustainable. Have you mentioned it makes the chain of chemicals and metal chemicals which are more harmful to the environment than leather, because the majority of brands that use the fast fashion brands and they source very cheap prices. My question is there any law that checks the brands which claim sustainable shoes? Is the really sustainable shoes any laws that keeps checks? And I think Joachim has already answered this, but is there a law that checks sustainable shoes is the question.
Not that I know of. When you say the shoe's sustainable, I think when you do other claims like organic cotton, we're using organic cotton, or what we're switching over to leather working group leathers, you have to then be able to, you will be certified. The minute you use a certain like organic cotton label or leather working group label, you then have to sign up and you will get audited on that front. But I'm not aware when you say the shoe is sustainable, like we say, it's more sustainable. So we created our own logo. We will not get audited by anyone at this stage. But I agree, there should be some sort of body that starts looking at that.
James, what was the glue called?
Oh, the brand is called Intercom, and it's called Eco Stick, and there are three strengths, and they're like contact adhesives. And this is the strongest one, but we also use the others for different jobs, but they're really, really very good. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it. I hope our audience can too.
Yeah.
We've got a comment. We've got bring back Blakey's. Very good, Jane. And so Mark Gummer, to everyone, has put the Institute for Creative Leather Technologies at the University of Northampton, along with Leather Naturally and Leather UK, have produced a consumer survey, and the report can be downloaded free from the Leather UK website. It touches on many things that have been discussed, such as longevity and repairability. So it's worth a look. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
And then I have a question. Any more questions coming in from the audience? But I also have a question in the meantime. You talk about water-based glues. Have you ever experienced an occasion where you've used a new glue, a new material, and actually it hasn't worked, or it has, not had the reverse effect? To our panelist.
Yes, but we test them first before I put them in a shoe. I'll just glue a couple of bits of leather together and see if I can pull it apart, really.
We do Sartre tests on anything that goes in production. So if Sartre approves it, then we're good to fall back on that. So yeah.
Great.
But the technology in adhesives is really getting much better in the last few years. It's amazing, really.
I've got one from Jamie. This is to Helen. Do you think your repair renew model would be possible on an industrial scale in the future?
I was going to ask that. I think that's interesting.
Do you know what? It's so interesting, because if you'd asked me for a few years ago, and actually I used to be very adamant when I used to explain to people, and I used to say, no, that's not what we do. We do made to order, and it's for individual clients, and that's the point. But much more in the last few years, I've thought, why not? So now I'm going all guns blazing to make that happen.
Hooray!
Exciting.
Well, if your raw material comes from the waste, you know, it's got to be a good thing. It's like repurposing waste.
Yeah.
So in a way, the big trainer companies are silly to not do that. You would think that that could be a good, you know, way of the shoe not ending up in waste so early. At least he gets a second life out of it. I think that's definitely a very, very clever new approach of coming up with newness.
They're supplying the raw materials for Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which we
so
love.
watch this space.
Do we have, so panelists, is there any other things that you would like to tell our audience this evening? Anything that you feel like your closing statement on this subject?
Okay, I would say that leather is a noble material and it is sustainable and we should be using it. There's lots of criticism that it's an animal product, but as long as people eat meat, it would be a waste to throw the skin away. Only 3% of the value of a cow is in the skin, and if people eat them, so we should make the most of it.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
Helen, have you got a closing statement or anything that you would like to add?
I think the best thing we can do to all be more sustainable individually is to take more care of the things that we already own. So I think just looking after the products you own, investing more in, you know, cleaning products, in, you know, just looking after what you already have is the most sustainable way to live. And if you do donate your shoes, tie your laces together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Helen. Joachim, is there anything you'd like to add to this debate?
Yes, buy less, but buy better.
Brilliant.
Definitely, yes.
Absolutely brilliant. So a massive thank you to our panelists for such thought-provoking conversations, and to the Cordwainers team who've organised this evening's webinar. And thank you, students, members, interested parties, for being just wonderful audience tonight. Thank you so much. Good night.